Welcome to video 7 in the Building Object Definitions module. This is an example video where we will use a repeat group to access table data within a custom object. So here's the basic model that we'll build. We have a source, we have two instances of our custom object, which is based on the processor, and then two different sinks. And then we have a data table in the main model that describes part types, corresponding processing time, the symbol index to use after processing, and then the destination that we want. So what we see here is part type A has this processing time and then goes to sink 1. Part type B has this processing time and then goes to sink 2. And then we use a mix column so that we can create either randomly part A and part B. And the idea here is that we want to be able to access the data table information inside the custom object. So I need to be able to access the processing time, I need to be able to access the symbol index so that I can change it after processing, and then I need to be able to access the destination node so that I can use a set node step and set the destination node for the entity after processing. And as we have discussed before, we know that we don't have access to the data tables from within inside the object. And so this corresponding processing logic that we have, where we delay for some period of time and then we assign the symbol index and then we set the node, we don't have direct access to this table. And so we saw one option in a previous workshop where we used add-on processes so that we do have access in the add-on process because they exist in the main model. In this example, what we're going to do instead is we're going to use a repeat group inside the processor and then map the data table to the repeat group. And then from within the custom object, it looks like we're accessing the data table, even though what we're actually accessing is that repeat group. So this is a very powerful feature and is quite useful. So before we actually demonstrate that, let me walk through the steps really quickly to show you what we're going to do. So first we're going to create the data table that we want inside the custom object. We'll then develop the process logic that uses table references as we normally do. Next I'm going to convert the table to a repeat group. Inside, again, still inside the custom object, and then I can delete the original renamed table because the repeat group reference or the references in the process logic will now be to the repeat group. Then I'll place an instance of the object in the main model, use the add data table using schema option in the add table button to create the table in the main object, in the main model. Then I'll go back to the object instance and set the repeat group value to the reference property for the new table. And then finally, I'll use the update project property defaults using this command from the context menu so that I can update the default values for all instances of the custom object. Okay, so here we are in Simio, and let's walk through this basic process. So I'm going to go back to Project Home and create my new processor object. There we go. So here's my processor. As usual, it created a process where we just simply in the transfer and then we immediately transfer out. And so we want to add our data table. So I'm going to go add my data table. I'm going to name it part types. Then I'm going to add my columns. The first column is an entity property. So this is part type. Then I'll add my processing time expression. So this is processing time. And we'll go ahead and specify the unit type as time and the default units as minutes. Then we'll add my symbol index, integer, symbol index. And then we'll add the destination node, object property node for dest node, destination node. And then finally we'll add the mix. We don't really need it here, but we'll go ahead and add it in. Mix. And so now we have the table structure that we specified in the PowerPoint. So we have a part type, which is an entity property, a processing time expression, symbol index, destination node, node property, and finally the mix value that we'll use. So now that we have the table, I can go into my process and use the table references as we normally would. So the first thing we'll do when an entity enters after we end the transfer is we'll delay, and now we will use our table reference part types, processing time. And so now we see the green arrow indicating that that's a reference. Then we'll assign the symbol index. So model entity dot picture using the part types symbol index value. Then finally we'll use the set node, and the specific destination is part types dest node. There we go, and then transfer out. And so entity transfers in, we delay for the time specified in the table, we assign the symbol index after processing to the value specified in the table, and then we set the destination node again to the value specified in the table. And so this is the typical way that we would use a data table to reference values in the process logic. So now that we have that, we can go, oops, I didn't mean to click on results. We'll go to data, and now the next step is to convert the part types table into a repeat group. So I'm going to convert to repeat group, and we see that the table was renamed. So now we have part types underscore original, and if we go to our processes, we can see that the processes still have the original reference for part types. So now I go back to my data tables, and I no longer need this table, so I'm just going to remove it. And so now we have our repeat group. So there's our repeat group, part types with their the corresponding properties, and the process logic accesses those repeat groups just as we would access a table. So now I'm going to go back to my model, and I need to create that table structure in my main model. But instead of creating it by hand, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Facility, then I'm going to add an instance of our new object, Processor, right? And now it has its repeat group defined. So when I go to Data, Add Table, I can use the Add Table from Schema option, and there's our repeat group right there, part types. So I click that, and now I have a part type, a new table with the corresponding schema. So there's our part type, which is, let me click on that, which is an entity property, our processing time expression property, integer property, node property, mixed property, exactly what we had in the repeat group. So let me just rename this part types. Not necessary, but I'm going to go ahead and do that for consistency. So now that I have the data table defined, I'm going to go back to the facility and my instance and then set the reference. So here's where I'm mapping the table to the repeat group. So I'm going to right click here as we normally would to set a reference property and then choose the table. And you can see now we have the reference property for the part type to the table. And if I click and look at the individual components of the repeat group, you can see those are all mapped to the corresponding column in my part type table. So the last step is I want this to be applied to all subsequent processor instances. So I'm going to right click here and then update processor property defaults from this. So now we have processor 1, and then when we add processor 2, it also has those same default values. So let's build the rest of the structure of our main model here. So we have a source. Let me grab my source. We have two entity types, or two entity instances, I mean. So let me do that, add those. Go ahead and change the name here. We said this was part A. And this one is part B. And let's change the color of part B. And because we have our symbol index property, let's go ahead and add another couple of symbols here. So part A, I'm going to add an additional symbol. So now it has two symbols. And so for the first symbol, we'll change its color. Let's make it this nice light blue color. And so now we have two symbols, 0 and 1. And for part type B, similarly, we'll add a symbol and we'll make it, I don't know, let's make it yellow. So we have two symbols for each. Starts out red, then goes to yellow for part B, starts out green, and then goes to light blue for part A. So we then add our two syncs. So there's sync 1, and there's sync 2. And then connect all these guys up with paths. So there's path from source to processor 2, source to processor 1. Then we're going to have paths to both sinks just so that we can demonstrate that our set node is working. And there we have our basic model structure. So let's go in and add our table entries. So we have part type A, processing time is random, exponential, 0.5, symbol index from 0 to 1, and we want it to go to sync 1, and its mix will be 1. Then we have part type B, random, exponential, 0.3, I'm sorry, this is random triangular, 0.3, if I can type today, 0.3, 0.5, 0.7. Its symbol index is also 1. We want it to go to input at sync 2, and we want its mix to be 1 also. So we have two rows, part type A, part type B. Each one has a corresponding processing time expression, has a symbol index, a destination node, and a mix. So let's go back to the facility now and tell our source that we want to create entities using the tables, or the table that we just defined. So before creating entities, I'm going to set a reference to my part type table. I'm going to use part types, mix, random row, to choose randomly using that mix. And then finally, I will set the entity type using the table. So part types, part type, to determine the part type. So now we have the source that creates entities using the table, and we should be good to go. So let's give it a click, and now you can see we created red ones, so we create a whole bunch of part type 2s, I guess. See if we're ever going to create any part type 1s here. There's one right there. Hopefully this is at the rate 50%, so there we go. And then so finally, the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that part type A's go to processor 2 and part type B's go to processor 1. So I'll just change the selection weight using is part A, so they'll go to processor 2, and is B, so they'll go to processor 1. And so let's also change these two guys so that we can not allow passing, so that we can actually see the queuing, because when we have our processor object doesn't have an input buffer, so they just line up. The entities waiting to go into the processor just wait. So we should see all the red ones go this way, all the green ones go this way. All the green ones should go to sync 1, all the red ones should go to sync 2. And I forgot they changed color. So we've changed the symbol index once they leave. So they come in green, they go out light blue. These guys come in red and go out yellow. And you can see that it does look like they're going to their correct sync values. If we want to see them go backwards, we could just change these two values. So is this part B? And this one part A. And now they should flip. Part A's go down here, part B's go up here by the selection weight, so there we go. And so now this one should, instead of going to sync 1, it should go to sync 2 because that's where we have specified in the destination. So you can see how easy this process was, relatively straightforward for me to do this. I just followed this simple, in this case, 8-step process. And so the power here comes in a couple of different places. One is just the concept of mapping from a table to a repeat group, but that we also have these two added features where we can add the data table using the schema option. So I only have to create the table once. I just create it in the custom object, and when I place the custom object, I then can create the table in the main model from that schema. And then also using this update project property defaults using this, so that I don't have to set those property values for every single instance of my custom object. So again, this is a very powerful feature. The one thing that you do have to do, though, to use this is you have to plan ahead, because you have to have the table structure when you build the custom object. So I would encourage you to give this a try and try this out and experiment with your model a little bit, changing the values in the table, maybe create some additional table rows, and make sure that you understand what's going on. So that concludes this video.